Hi, we're going to run through some strategies to help reduce the wordiness in our writing and improve our style and to make it sound like grown-up, adult, college-level writing. And there's some strategies here that I want to take a look at. The first one is to convert passive voice constructions into active voice. The second one is to replace state of being verbs, commonly known as linking verbs, with action verbs. Keep in mind that action verbs are like oxygen. You want to breathe action verbs into your writing and avoid state of being verbs. I jokingly refer to state of being verbs as SOBs because state of being, they can create some problems, and action verbs are the remedy to those problems. The third one says turning nominalized verbs back into action verbs. We very often have a tendency to try to make our style sound formal by turning our verb forms into nouns, and usually that just equates into wordiness. Eliminating redundancy. Redundancy means unnecessarily repetitious. That could be the unnecessary repetition of a single word, could be the unnecessary repetition of an idea, and sometimes that's the case of just not being able to make all of your thoughts go in a straight line. The next one is breaking up prepositional phrase strings. Prepositional phrase strings are style killers. We don't want to just pile prepositional phrase on top of prepositional phrase in our writing because, first of all, prepositional phrases very seldom, if ever, have verbs, let alone action verbs, and when you string them on top of each other, then your writing is going without oxygen, without those good action verbs that are the keys to good writing. Taking those prepositional phrases, and what do we do with them? We turn them into simple modifiers, and we'll talk about some ways how to do that when we get to our examples. And finally, deleting there is constructions. Anytime you see there plus a state of being verb is in your writing, or there is, there was, there were, there will be, anything like that, most of the time you can just cross that out, and there's a word there that will replace it that finishes the thought so much better. Let's take a look at how that works, okay? Number one says the pitcher's curveball shows a lot of movement. And you don't have to start with any one of those suggestions right away. You just read each sentence, and any place where you can make a change, then let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing I see is the word movement, which sounds to me like a verb that's been turned into a noun. So instead of shows a lot of movement, let's turn movement into an actual verb, and let's replace the other verb that's in this sentence with move. The pitcher's curveball moves a lot. Now we get rid of the preposition of, which previously, before we made our changes, started a prepositional phrase. Now we say the pitcher's curveball moves a lot. So we've got the same thing. It all moves in a straight line, and it says exactly the same thing as what we said before, only with fewer words. Let's take a look at the next one. The mechanic made a prediction that the car would have rattling tendencies. Now, the first thing I see in this sentence is the verb have, and although this verb is technically an action verb, it might just be the deadest action verb in the English language. It's overused, it's generic, it's very, very non-specific. So I would say anytime you see that word, it's a good chance that you could get rid of it and replace it with an actual visible verb, a moving verb, a vivid verb. So in this case, let's see how we can do that. Okay, so one of the ways we can get rid of have is by taking this word and turning it into a verb. Rattling tendencies. Well, it's an adjective right now. So let's turn it into a verb. Instead of have rattling tendencies, let's just say rattle. All right, so there's one thing, that one loose end that we've tied up. The mechanic, instead of made a prediction, there we have another word that could be turned into a verb. It's actually in a noun form right now, but instead of made a prediction, let's just say the mechanic predicted that the car would rattle. Now, we may have lost some meaning by taking some of that out. So the previous form said would have rattling tendencies. So if you want to add a little bit more for emphasis, you could say tend to rattle. That way, the car doesn't rattle all the time. So we want to capture that meaning, and we want to say something like the car would tend to rattle or would continue to rattle or something like that, just to indicate the idea that the car is not going to rattle all the time every time you turn on the car. Okay, but you see how this all works in a straight line, and you've gotten rid of some dead wood, and getting rid of the excess words, the ones that don't really do anything. It's a little bit like, I don't know, I use some metaphors to describe that. It's a little bit like keeping or losing the fat and keeping the muscle, because words are like weight. And ideally, if we're going to gain weight, we want to gain muscle weight. We don't want to gain weight that's just going to hold us down. So words usually either hold us back or they further the meaning. And we want to get rid of the ones that don't do anything and replace them with words that actually contribute to the meaning. So let's take a look at number 3. The runner's race came to an end with a strong finish. All right, so right away I'm seeing some words like end, that's a noun, and finish is also a noun. Let's see if we can't turn those nouns into verbs. The runner's race came to an end. All right, how about if we take this word, the runner, and instead of focusing on the race, let's call this person a person rather than, using it as an adjective. The runner finished the race. Okay, now what about this part here? Came to an end. Well, do we want to turn that into a verb? You know what? We don't even need it now because it's redundant. Aren't the words finish and end the same thing? So now that we've done this, it's a little more clear that we really don't need that idea. So the runner finished the race strongly. Aha. So now we have captured the meaning. We've said it in a way that's nice and concise. All of those words contribute to the meaning. And the best thing is that now you've freed up some room so that you can add some words and some sentences that contribute to the substance. And what I mean by that are words that, examples, support, proof, the things that really make your writing, worth reading. So now you can add some more information. Let's take a look at number 4. Making maneuvers in the hallway was difficult because there was overcrowding. All right, so we can start anywhere in this sentence. Maneuvers looks to me like a noun that could be turned into a verb. Instead of making maneuvers, why don't we say maneuvering? Maneuvering in the hallway was difficult. Okay, so now it's starting to come together because there was overcrowding. Now, there was is a phrase that I would suggest if you have a search mechanism on your computer program, and most of them do, I would suggest that you would search for the phrase there was, or there were, or there will be, and there's almost always a way to get rid of it. It's something we do in casual conversation. It's okay if you say the word when you're speaking, but in writing, it doesn't contribute anything, and it usually takes up the position of something that you could replace with words that actually have meaning. So maneuvering in the hallway was difficult because there was overcrowding. All right, let's just get rid of there was. I think that's the first step. Because of overcrowding. Okay, we could do it that way, but I'm seeing something much more effective. Let's take overcrowding and turn it into a nice, simple modifier. And let's put it right here in front of the thing that it modifies. And now we have ourselves a nice, concise sentence. Maneuvering in the overcrowded hallway was difficult. It means exactly the same thing that we saw before, but now it says it in fewer words. And again, it's not any more grammatically correct, but is more stylistic sound. It's effective, and that's really what we're talking about here, is the effectiveness of your writing, the efficiency of your writing. It's not incorrect, or it's not wrong to drive a car that gets 10 miles to the gallon, but it is much more efficient to drive the same car that would get 50 miles to the gallon. I don't think anybody would argue about which would be the better choice, and words are much the same way. And now we've freed up some room to support our answer. Maneuvering in the crowded hallway was difficult, so Fred took the back stairs, or something like that. We can add some more meaning to complete the idea, rather than just putting a lot of dead words into our writing. All right, this next one, oh my goodness, it looks like somebody tried really hard to be wordy with number 5. Because of the establishment of the new dress code, several students have shown their discontent by holding protests of the policy in small ways. Okay, I don't think anybody is going to argue that that's the best way to convey that idea. We have all kinds of words that could be turned into verbs instead of nouns, and the first thing I see is establishment. We could say establish as a verb, but I'm also seeing some things like this, the prepositional phrase strings: of the establishment, of the new dress code, of the policy, in small ways. All right, so we have 4 prepositional phrases that really cloud the meaning of the sentence. It also creates this really sing-song kind of rhythm that you get caught up in, and you don't focus on the meaning so much. You're only focusing on sort of that rhythm that goes on with the repetition. Okay, so where do we want to begin here? Several students have shown their discontent by holding protests of the policy in small ways. Okay, I'm going to start here. Instead of in small ways, this is one of the suggestions that is mentioned at the top of the paper. The only word that actually has any meaning there is the word small. So let's get rid of the other 2 words. And what is small? Protests. So let's take this word, and we will... Okay, my machine's not cooperating. By holding small protests. All right. The word protests is a noun that we could turn into a verb by... Okay, so they've shown their discontent by holding small protests. Well, isn't that why you protest, is to show your discontent? Let's do this. Because of the establishment of the dress code, several students protested the policy. Okay, now we're losing a little bit there because I cut out the word small, but I don't know that that's necessarily essential. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but we can convey that in another way a little bit later on if we want to go back and include it. So because of the establishment, as we said before, establishment is a noun that could be turned into a verb, or maybe we should ask ourselves if we even need it at all. Because of the new dress code? Because of the new dress code, several students protested the policy. All right, so I'm starting to see this come together now, and you see how much more clearly the meaning comes across when you get rid of all that that extra wording that doesn't really contribute anything. Now, do we want to say they protested quietly or in a small way or something like that? Maybe we could add that, but we don't necessarily have to. So, but you get the idea. Let's move on to number 6. Here we have our old friend, there was. And this is something that I see in student writing on a regular basis. People starting off sentences with the words, there was. One of the reasons why that's such a problem is because the subject and verb place in any sentence is going to be the most important place in the sentence. It's going to carry the most weight. It's going to get the most emphasis. So what you've done here when you start off a sentence with there was is that you have eaten up the subject and verb position with a phrase that doesn't mean anything. So that's one of the reasons why I would suggest that you not use there was. Just get rid of it. So let's delete it right away. All right, a disturbance created by our neighbors. Wow, this is really awkward. A disturbance created by our neighbors by the holding of a party that was large in the home in which they made their dwelling. Well, gosh, isn't the word dwelling, doesn't that mean the same thing as home? So we have some redundancy. Let's just get rid of that. That's just silliness. In their home. And where else do you dwell besides in your home? Right? So, created by our neighbors. That's a passive voice construction. A disturbance created by our neighbors. Passive voice means that the actor of the verb, and in this case the verb is created, who did the creating? The disturbance didn't create anything. It's the neighbors that created. And the problem with passive voice is it takes the actor, or the agent is another word for it, and puts it after the verb. And so the person or the thing who's acting upon the verb really is not acting on the verb at all. So it's really not a natural time order or word order. So let's make the neighbors creating the disturbance. A lot of people think that passive voice makes their writing sound more formal. They think it makes it sound more scholarly and academic, and it really doesn't. It just adds a lot of extra wording that you don't need, and a lot of times it leaves out the actor, so there's some problems with passive voice as well. So let's say our neighbors created a disturbance by, all right, now we can get rid of this, or capitalize our first word in the sentence. Our neighbors created a disturbance by the holding of a party. Seriously? Now it's almost natural that we get rid of this, right? By holding a party. Now you've gotten rid of another preposition. By holding a party that was large. Okay, let's just get rid of that was, and let's take that simple modifier and put it right in front of the thing that it modifies. The party was large. A large party in their home. Our neighbors created a disturbance by holding a large party in their home. Now that makes a lot of sense. We could probably do that one better though by saying our neighbors disturbed. Now, one of the keys to good writing is to make sure that you make a clear connection between who is doing what. And in this case, we have the who, and we know that they're creating a disturbance, but then there's really no receiver of that action. To create a disturbance sort of ignores the fact that somebody has to be disturbed. In order for a disturbance to occur, somebody else has to be disturbed. So let's take disturbance and turn it into a verb. Our neighbors disturbed. Okay, now we're getting room for more information. We're establishing a much clearer picture. Our neighbors disturbed someone. I don't know who they're disturbing, but the person who wrote this sentence should know, because that person has that idea in his or her head. And so let's say who that person disturbed. Did they disturb everyone in the neighborhood? Did they disturb Grandpa because he was sleeping? So we have room for more information that really adds substance and creates a much clearer picture. All right, so hopefully you see how this is all coming together. All right, let's take a look then at number 7. Our team that is known for its running speed is deserving of the state title. All right, so you see that sort of choppy, rocking back and forth rhythm that's created with wordy style. Our team that is known for its running speed is deserving of the state title. Okay, there's a state of being verb. There's one of those SOBs. Is deserving of, and there's a prepositional phrase of the state title. Nice, simple, stylistic move. Deserves the state title, or deserves to win the state title. Now we have a verb, right? Okay, so our team that is known for its running speed. Again, it has that sort of jerky stopping and starting motion. Our team, well, maybe we could do something. What team are we talking about? There's some information being left out here. Is it a football team? Is it a track team? I don't know, but I think we deserve to know. So let's just say it's a track team, okay? Our track team, we could do this and put a little interrupting phrase here. Known for its running speed, that would be called an adjective clause. Our team, known for its running speed, deserves the state title. See how much more clear that comes across? And again, when you get rid of the dead wood, you realize how much information is really missing. A lot of times that wordiness contributes to, or just, it allows you to hide behind meaningless words. All right, let's take a look then at number 8. The actors were disturbed by the clearing of the throat of a man who was seated in the section referred to as the balcony section. Holy cow. Hopefully you can see that this just isn't going to work in a high school senior, college freshman, or any kind of a style that comes from a writer who professes to know what he or she's doing. Okay, so the actors were disturbed by. So the first thing I see there is were disturbed, which is a passive voice verb. The actors were disturbed. All right, who's actually doing the disturbing? Not the actors. The actors are receiving the disturbance. The person who's doing the disturbing is the man. So we might want to think about making that man the subject of the verb disturbed. But we can come back to that just a little bit. Let's take a look at some of the more obvious things. The clearing of the throat of a man. 3 prepositional phrases right in a row. Let's make this man clearing his throat. okay, instead of the clearing of the throat. Disturbed by a man who was clearing his throat. Seated. Do we need to say that the man was seated? If there are actors involved, if there's an audience involved, chances are we can put the pieces together and say that this is a person who is attending a play. And if he's in the balcony, he's probably seated. He's probably not in the standing room only section. And it doesn't really matter if this person is sitting or standing, so seated doesn't really add much information. The section referred to as the balcony section. Well, you know, you've heard the phrase water is wet. If it's a section, it's going to be a section. You don't need to say that twice. That's a classic example of what we mean by redundancy. Clearing his throat in the, do we want to say balcony section? All right, that's a good start. In the balcony section. We may not even need the word section because the balcony is just a, you know, it's an essential part of a lot of theaters, so we can keep that or not depending on what you want to do, but I'm going to get rid of that. The balcony. The actors were disturbed by a man who was clearing his throat in the balcony. Now that makes a lot of sense. We've cut out a lot of words. It means exactly the same thing as what it said before, but it says it much more clearly. We still have this passive construction here, though. The actors were disturbed by a man. Now, not all passive voice is bad. Passive voice is a very specialized tool, and the problem with passive voice is that it's overused. So you don't want to take a specialized tool that's only for certain jobs and use it for every job. You know, we have tools like hammers and saws and things that are, you know, used for lots and lots of different things. Passive voice is not that tool. Passive voice is something you would want to use only in special occasions, and this might be a special occasion. The actors were disturbed. So if we want to put the emphasis on the actors being disturbed, then we would leave it in passive voice. If we wanted to focus on the man clearing his throat, then we would change it around a little bit and say a man who was clearing his throat in the balcony disturbed the actors. So you could rearrange it, put the word disturbed into active voice, and you can change the emphasis. So that's what we call a stylistic choice. This is what makes you the boss of your own writing, is which of those stylistic choices you make in your own writing. All right, let's take a look at number 9. There was an injury that was sustained by a player of the game of baseball. Okay, so hopefully by now you see how ridiculous that is. But sometimes these easy examples can reveal the method a little bit better. So instead of the game of baseball, we can take this word and cut it and put it right here. Call our friend a baseball player, and we know that baseball is a game, so we don't need to say the game of baseball. There was, oh, there's my favorite word to get rid of, and before I do anything else, I'm just going to get rid of it because it's almost always expendable. An injury that was sustained. Okay, so what we want to say is, well, again, back to our who is doing what. Let's put the baseball player at the beginning of the sentence. A baseball player. Let's turn this into an active voice verb. It's not going to let me cut it. Now here we go. Baseball player sustains an injury. Now we can get rid of all this dead wood at the end of the sentence. Wow, that seems like a really short, choppy sentence. And it is. And you don't want to leave it just like that. You want to add more information to put some meat on the bones of this thought and to convey an idea to your readers that really means something. So this isn't any more skinny and meaningless than it was before. It's just that meaninglessness is exposed when we do this. All right, let's take one last look at, oh my goodness, this is going to take some doing. The creation of a documentation of Susan B. Anthony's accomplishments by a well-known filmmaker was in the service of making him quite famous in his chosen field of endeavor. Oh boy, where do we want to start here? The creation of a document. Okay, the first thing I'm seeing there is the word creation, which is a noun. Could be turned into the verb created. A documentation of Susan B. Anthony's accomplishments by a well-known filmmaker. All right, I'm starting to see this pattern again where we have, who is the actor? Who is the person, the force, the driving force behind this creation? And it's not in the subject of the sentence. This well-known filmmaker should probably be the focal point of this sentence. So let's just take the well-known filmmaker, and I would say we probably should name this person as well. That would add some good information. And let's capitalize our A. This is a work in progress. A well-known filmmaker. Aha, now we can take that noun and turn it into a verb. Created. Oh, now we can get rid of the prepositional phrase of a documentation and just say a. And do we really want to call it a documentation? I think somebody's overcorrecting, trying to sound fancy, but really what we're talking about is a documentary. So now it's starting to take shape already. A well-known, I think my computer's telling me that well-known is hyphenated. There we go. A well-known filmmaker created a documentary of Susan B. Anthony's accomplishments. Okay. We don't need by. We can get rid of that one. Was in the service of. I don't even know why that's there. It's absolutely not necessary. A well-known filmmaker created a documentary of Susan B. Anthony's accomplishments, comma, making him quite famous in his chosen field of endeavor. Boy, that phrase just sounds like somebody was desperate to fulfill their word quota, their word minimum, and just decided to throw in as much wordiness as they could. We don't need that. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever. It just clouds the meaning. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we're left with. A well-known filmmaker created a documentary of Susan B. Anthony's accomplishments, making him quite famous. All right, now that's a pretty manageable, clear sentence. We could probably do a few other things, play around with some other possibilities of Susan B. Anthony's accomplishments. I don't know that the word accomplishments is necessary. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But again, that's what makes it your writing and your style, is to choose to add some things or to get rid of them, making him quite famous. You could say a well-known filmmaker became famous by creating a documentary of Susan B. Anthony's accomplishments. There are lots of different stylistic choices we have there. But I hope you get a better idea of what I mean by stylistic economy. We want to make sure our writing says what it has to say in an effective way, and we want to get rid of all that extra wording that clouds the meaning. And let's go back and review again what those strategies are. We want to convert passive voice into active voice. We want to get rid of those SOBs and replace them with action verbs. And as you can see, verbs are mentioned in several of these. So action verbs are really going to be one of the major keys to good writing. One of the things you can do with a nominalized verb, what that means is a verb that's been turned into a noun, turn it back into a verb, and it's amazing how much you can look back and see that you really don't need all those extra words once we turn those verbs back into verbs. Getting rid of redundancy. You don't want to be unnecessarily repetitious. When we speak, sometimes we don't make ourselves very clear, so we just have to repeat the idea. With writing, we have all the time in the world to go back and eliminate some of that excess stuff that we didn't quite get right the first time. Breaking up prepositional phrase strings. Hopefully you've seen the rhythm and the choppiness that strings of prepositional phrases contribute. Turning those prepositional phrases into simple modifiers. Getting rid of there is. Again, I would just go through and do a search and find there is and delete every place where you use that phrase. Again, there are other forms. There is, there are, there were, there will be. Anything with there and a state of being verb. Get rid of those. So hopefully this will send you on your way to writing much tighter, much more concise, much more economical prose that makes a whole lot more sense. And that's really what writing is all about, is making sense. Not impressing people with fancy words, not impressing people with overly complex style, but actually having something to say and say it effectively.